Rethinking U.S. War in Afghanistan is at Politico.com right now. Check out the New America Foundation website for more.
You can put the Liberty Radio Network on the air in your area. Visit broadcast.lrn.fm to learn how. Broadcast.lrn.fm.
I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. My head really hurts. If I don't find a way out of here, I'm gonna go berserkers. I'm crazy and I'm hurt.
All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio. On the phone is Matthew Ho. He's a former Marine and State Department officer. We're talking about why he quit his State Department job. Let me ask you real quick. Are you now with the New America Foundation yourself?
No, I'm actually now a senior fellow over at the Center for International Policy and the Afghanistan Study Group, and we have a website.
The Center for International Policy. Now, which one is that?
That's one of the many think tanks here in D.C. I mean, if you come visit.
My head is swimming with acronyms.
All kinds of, yep, we are CIP here. It's been around for 20, 25 years, or maybe a little longer. A lot of issues with Central America, with South America.
Oh, yeah. Wait, is that the same group? Changed their name, but are the guys that did writeweb.com?
I do not know.
.org?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, I mean, I can't keep track. I'm sorry. Let's
get
back to the point.
You know, and Scott, I'm new to this. You know, I didn't read blogs really before this last year. I mean, I worked in D.C. in the government, but I wasn't involved in the think tank crowd or different policy or advocacy groups. So I'm still learning my way through the system here.
Yeah, that's all right.
But
I used to always think that George Bush should have read Antiwar.com. He would have known that Richard Pearl and them were using him as the big fool. We all knew that before it worked, you know. He went ahead and anyway. So look, when we went out to the break, you were talking about how just the incompetence of the administration of the wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan is what made you really finally say nuts to this. But I say, yeah, but that's before the heroic General David Petraeus, whose surges always work and can do anything and will be the greatest president in American history sometime very soon, came and took charge. And with his genius, even though he had kind of a big mouth, but awesome, excellent Delta Force operator, General Stanley McChrystal, and those guys, they know what they're doing. No more McKiernan, no more, all that WikiLeaks data about all these IED attacks doing nothing but increase and increase and increase and increase, and more insurgents and more people joining the rebellion in Afghanistan. That all doesn't count because that all ends last December. And since then, the new guys rode in on their white horses, and now Petraeus himself is in charge of the war. And so how could anything possibly go wrong?
Well, if you look at it in the sense that I do and many others do as well, that we really haven't changed our strategy in Afghanistan. That since 2004, 2005, and if you look up the New York Times from, I believe it was February of 2004, or maybe April of 2004, General Barno, who was the commanding general at that point, said, we're doing counterinsurgency now. We've been doing counterinsurgency in Afghanistan since, for the last five years or so, or maybe longer. It's just a question now we're doing it larger and bigger, recovering more ground, and all it's doing is increase the size of insurgency. It's increased the casualties. It's decreased support for the Karzai government. So this idea that we finally got the right strategy, I find completely specious, and it's not borne out by the evidence on the ground there. And in the same way, too, the idea that the increase in troops in Iraq was what helped stabilize Iraq in 2007. It was important. I mean, I was there in 06, 07. It was good to get a couple thousand extra Marines into Anbar province, but I'll be the first to say if there are 5 or 6 reasons for the stability stability in quotes. I mean, Iraq is still far from being a stable nation, but it's better than it was, say, 4 years ago. That stability was for a bunch of different reasons. I would say the extra troops, that troop surge we hear so much about, was probably reason number 5 or 6 out of several reasons for the stability in Iraq post-2007. So,
they made things worse in the Sadrist eastern Baghdad. All they did was pick a giant fight and a Shiite rebellion when Sadr had been basically sitting back. He's in the catbird seat after all. Why fight?
Yeah, I've got a great friend. He's trying to get a book published right now about his time in Baghdad in 2003 and into 2004, and talks about how when he was in Sadr City, and talks about how originally Sadr tried to work with us and talk with us, and we just ignored him to the point of disrespect, and basically pushed him into the position he was in.
Yeah, they seized his newspaper. I remember former Congressman Bob Dornan on TV going, yeah, well, we had to seize his newspaper because he's saying outrageous anti-American things, and we're going to shut him down, and that's going to save the lives of soldiers. And then the next day, a massive battle in Sadr City when Casey Sheehan was killed, when is it Anthony, I'm sorry, I forget the young man's name, that Phil Donahue did the great documentary about, who got one through the spine, who I met at Camp Casey back in 2005. Good young men died over picking a fight with Muqtada al-Sadr, who they invaded the country and basically handed over to him whether they knew it or not. Apparently they never did.
It's amazing. When you do it and you're over there and you go back and reflect upon it, how much we just didn't understand, how much we didn't know, how much hubris and arrogance is involved in all this, and how much we just made stuff worse than it ever needed to be. And again, I'm not arguing that the invasion was right. Far from it. Trust me, I'll go to my grave convinced that was the worst mistake of this century. Just our own arrogance and hubris.
Well, the first decade, anyway.
Yeah. So, God forbid we have anything worse than that. Holy cow, we'd be in trouble. But with Afghanistan, the idea that our presence there fuels the insurgency. I mean, that's the second recommendation, and probably the one that strikes most with your listeners, is the idea that we call for the withdrawal of combat forces, of American and NATO combat forces from southern Afghanistan, that we talk about sizable troop withdrawals for the next couple of years. And in my own call has been consistently since last year for a ceasefire, because the combat there is serving no purpose but just to engender a cycle of combat. And so I would believe that most of your listeners probably identify with that second one the most, since I'm on Antiwar Radio. But, if your listeners have not looked at our report, you can find it at AfghanistanStudyGroup.org. If you agree with the report, please share it and call your congressman. If you don't agree with the report, call your congressman anyway. The one thing I'll say is that I've spent a lot of times in
Wait a minute, let me ask you, it sounds like that is basically de facto dividing Afghanistan in half instead of just getting the hell out of there, man.
No, I'm completely against that, completely against the idea of partition. When I was there and in my time here, I just met with a representative from Hezbollah Islami, which is the second largest insurgent group in Afghanistan, just last week, and any Afghan Americans I speak with, too, as well as the Afghans I met in my 5 months or so over there. No, the idea of partition is something that is
not.
Well,
I mean, if the forces all withdraw to the areas where it's mostly Uzbeks, Hazaras, and Tajiks, and out of the Pashtun areas where most of the rebellion is, then what are you doing, and how long are you going to stay there and up in the northwest part?
Well, that all comes down to negotiations, but at least it gets you to negotiations.
All right. It's something anyway. I really appreciate the effort to just change the politics of this thing. I mean, frankly, Charles Kruthammer and William Crystal still dictate what's, a reasonable discussion in this society on foreign policy somehow. And, somebody's got to do something about it. I really appreciate you and Steve Clemens and all you guys who worked on this for doing something, Matthew.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate your time.
All right. I appreciate yours as well, everybody. That's Matthew Ho. He's with the... I forgot what it was called again. Something. And look at AfghanistanStudyGroup.org, A New Way Forward.